Moral Constraint from Law Through Mathematics by Curt Doolittle. I hope that this spectrum, law, economics, assists us in understanding the position of praxeology in the list of moral constraints that require operational, intuitionistic tests of propositions prior to making truth claims. Law, strict construction. Strict construction is an abused term where the courts instead use the terms textualism and original intent, but under proprietarian property rights theory, strict construction refers to requiring that any law passed be accompanied by argument showing that such a law is specifically authorised by the Constitution. In other words, laws constitute the permissible legal operations, and none of them can violate property rights. This is important because otherwise, if discretion is required, then judges can insert deception, imaginary content, bias, and errors into the body of law, brackets, as they have done, circumventing the legislature, the Constitution, and property rights, close brackets. As such, the principle of proprietarian strict construction, brackets, as opposed to textualism's strict construction, close brackets, requires that we operationally define the construct of any law. This principle is important because laws have the greatest effect on a polity, and often the greatest unintended effect upon individuals and the polity. Economics, praxeology. Intuitionism, brackets praxeology, close brackets, in economics is important because manipulation of the economy causes redistributions, gains, and losses. As a moral constraint, it is only slightly less influential than law. Psychology, operationism. Operationism in psychology was important in the recent transformation of psychology from a pseudoscience to an experimental discipline, and because psychologists do produce and did produce negative externalities, in other words, harm to others, not the least of which was multiple generations suffering from illness cast as cognitive problems. Medicine, protocolism, brackets, medical operationalism, close brackets. Medical treatments and tests are discussed as protocols. Physics, operationalism. Operationalism is physics, was important because it demonstrated that we expended a great deal of time and money by not practicing operationalism, and that Einstein's innovation should have been much earlier and could have been if we had practiced it. Mathematics, intuitionism. Intuitionism in mathematics was less important because there are few, if any, externalities produced by classical mathematical operations, other than the psychological fallacy that there exists some separate mathematical reality. Economic intuitionism, brackets, operationalism, is meaningful. Therefore, the highest moral requirement for demonstration of construction is in the domain of economics, wherein the greatest externalities are caused by economic policy. Rationalists just have it backwards. Justification rather than criticism. Quote, the silver rule wins over the golden rule too, for the same reason, close quote. Macroeconomic phenomena are emergent and non-deducible, even if they are explainable. As such, economics is no different than any other constructed upon laws. Theories of arbitrary precision open to constant reformation. For economic theories to be testified as true, we must demonstrate that they are open to construction by sympathetic tests. As such, just as the golden rule is backwards and the silver rule is correct, Mises just has praxeology backwards. It's that we can't claim something is true unless we can explain it as rational actions. But that does not mean we cannot rely upon observations and instrumentation to help us observe and criticise emergent phenomenon. Empiricists claim that other than some intrinsic simple intuitions (brackets, grammar, intention, status signal, and empathy, etc., close brackets), all knowledge is gained from sense experience, and this includes all deductions. Brackets, cognitive science agrees with this hypothesis, close brackets. This is obvious to people educated after 1980, when cognitive science began to replace psychology, and accelerated after 2000, when Pinker restated cognition. Instrumentalists argue, correctly, that phenomenon must be reduced to stimuli open to human sense experience and comparison. This is also obvious. But then how do we test our hypotheses? We cannot subjectively test physical phenomenon, nor can we reason with the first principles of the universe. We don't know them. So for physical phenomenon, we must create experiments to test our hypotheses, where in human phenomenon, the same test results are obtained by introspection. If subject to the same stimuli, would a reasonable person come to the same conclusion? We could not judge intent or trust others if we did not have this ability, so we are marginally indifferent in our ability to judge intentions if possessed of similar (brackets, symmetric, close brackets) knowledge. This is why informational symmetry is so important. So in matters of human action, where we know the first principles, all phenomenon, whether deducible or emergent, must be explainable as a sequence of rational human actions, each of which is subject to subjective testing by means of information and sympathy, or it cannot be true. Just as all measurements (brackets, observations) of physical tests must be possible to perform in order for the claims of the test to be true (brackets, Bridgman, close brackets), just as all mathematical proofs must be open to construction via basic mathematical operations for them to be true, just as any proprietarian law must be constructed from productive, fully informed, warranted, voluntary transfers free of negative externality. So all scientific disciplines are identical in dependence upon empirical (brackets, sense experience, close brackets), instrumental (brackets, reduction to sense experience, close brackets), operational (brackets, existentially possible, close brackets, constraints. The counter-proposition. No one disagrees that if economic phenomenon are not explainable in rational terms, that the theory cannot be true. The question of economic science is how we can take advantage of emergent phenomenon to bring forward productivity and consumption (brackets, wealth, close brackets) as a means of improving the commons. This is the purpose of credit and interest. But this principle can be applied in hundreds of permutations throughout the economy. The moral (brackets, German, Austrian, close brackets) implication is that this study must eschew immoral manipulation (brackets, thefts, close brackets), and work only to improve the institutional means of moral cooperation without the conduct of thefts. The immoral (brackets, Anglo-empirical) implication is that this study should seek Pareto optimums (brackets, Rawlsian ethics, close brackets) by reframing harm by discounting loss of choice by some to redistribute choice to others. I agree with the German thesis and expressly disagree with the Anglo-universalist fallacy which has gotten us to this state entirely because Anglos were able to seduce the Germans into the World War. Justification versus criticism. Warranty in normative contract versus warranty in exploration, independent of norms. First, what do we mean by knowledge? And of those things we mean, what is merely allegory and what is necessity? Little of the universe is absent regular patterns. However, some are very noisy and difficult to find. Some are very subtle and hard to find. Some are either too large or too small to observe without relying upon instruments, and others must be deduced using logical instruments. We call these regular patterns information. Humans can modify the real world in a variety of ways, leaving information behind. We can do this as simply leaving evidence of passage through time, through forces or field, or in archaeological evidence. We can do this intentionally with cave paintings and writing. We can do it with our architecture, monuments and earthworks. We can do this by the memories that we transfer between generations through repetition of experience, advice and story. A computer must run a program to create the experience we see before us when using it. Information must mix with memories to create the experience we call knowing. Knowledge is reconstructed from information by mixing with existing memories, just as meaning is transferred by the use of analogies to transfer properties. So information exists without a knowing subject, and that information may be very good or very bad at producing the experience of knowledge in a subject. But in colloquial language, we seem to have an intellectual bias that wants to separate untrue knowledge from true, or at least tested knowledge, thereby conflating quality of knowledge and existence of knowledge. We can forgive philosophers this common error, since they are concerned, most often, with the persuasive quality (truth) of propositions. And if we look carefully at the discussion of knowledge, we find philosophers conflating A. existence/awareness, B. risk/willingness to act, C. truth content. And moreover, truth content consists of two additional properties. C1. Persuasive power, assuming an honest participant, and C2. Parsimonious correspondence with reality, what we mean by true, The reason that discussion of knowledge is problematic is that this term is a sort of catch-all for these separate properties. And so, like many concepts, argument is a problem of conflating properties, each of which exists on a separate spectrum. Knowing could mean, quote, awareness gained through experience, closed quote, or, quote, given what we know from experience, I am willing to act upon it, close quote. Or knowing could mean, quote, through experience, we believe this is true, close quote. So I think that the only possible meaning of the category knowledge is awareness of a regular pattern that allows us to predict something, even if it is only to predict in the sense of identifying something as part of a category, the most simple prediction possible. And then we have the persuasive power of knowledge, in convincing the self or others, first to state that something is possible, then second to state something is worthy of action, risk, close brackets. For example, no one knows how to build a computer, or a cheeseburger for that matter, close brackets, in the sense that they possess knowledge of construction of the constituent parts. So some knowledge can never be centralised except as a hierarchy of abstractions. Trust in one another's claim to actionable knowledge. For these reasons, the number of casual axes in the category we call knowledge, close brackets, I think we cannot improve upon casting knowledge as A. Awareness, existence, of a regular pattern combining information and memory to create an experience, which we then also remember. B. All knowledge is theoretical and open to revision, no premises are certain, close brackets, where theoretical propositions contain both. C. Truth content, parsimonious correspondence with reality. D. Persuasive power, sufficiency, close brackets, in an honest discourse, brackets, risk reduction, stroke, reward increase, close brackets. Justification versus criticism. Contract versus truth. My problem is that justified true belief is not false under the test of risk, but is not meaningful under the test of analytic truth. In this sense, it depends upon which thing we are talking about. Willingness to act, brackets, justified true belief, willingness of others to ensure actions, brackets, contractual justified true belief, close brackets, and analytic truth, brackets, parsimonious correspondence with reality, close brackets. If a man gives witness in testimony and later on we find a video of the events and it turns out that he was wrong, that it is easy to understand how he was mistaken, we do not consider his testimony false. We only warrant that rational man is capable of warranting. In science, we warrant that we have done due diligence. We have criticised our own arguments. We testify that we have done due diligence. We have criticised our own position. In this sense, both justified true belief is necessary for contractual propositions, while critical rationalism, brackets, warranty, close brackets, is the only epistemological possibility we can rely upon. The fact that argument evolved out of law, brackets, debate in the polis, close brackets, probably explains the origin of conflation of contractual justification according to the norms of the polity with the pursuit of analytic truth in epistemological exploration. The fact that most human action is contractual and very little of our lives epistemic explains the persistence of both the contractual, brackets, justificationary, close brackets, and epistemic, brackets, critical scientific, close brackets, as method, and the conflation of the term knowledge as a general term covering both contractual and epistemic uses. Norms guide most human actions. Norms are habituated and therefore reduced to intuitions to function. The norms are contractual, brackets, justificationary, so that we can avoid blame, close brackets. Science, by contrast, produces not actions, but testimony. The problem is inverted. In science, all we produce is testimony, regardless of normative rules. In normative relations, we produce actions that we justify as according to the normative rules of society. So we can testify that we are justified according to norms in contractual relations, and we testify that our statements are free of norms, imaginary, errors, bias, habituated deception, and outright deception in science. This is why science is a luxury good. It's terribly expensive, and scientific testimony is terribly expensive. Justification allows us to use scientifically tested or evolutionarily tested general rules in real-world actions / contractual relations. And must. We cannot create general rules out of justificationary testimony, only out of critical testimony. For this reason, both justificationary and critical testimony will persist forever. While our warranties must be given by critical means, our testimony is forever justificationary. Brackets. I think that is fairly profound. Close brackets. As far as I know, albeit in brief, this is the most accurate statement of our extant understanding of the question of knowledge, and why it has been so troublesome a concept.